Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you for joining us. We have a really great panel today. We're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to nearly everyone. That is, whether you're a company, how to hire in these days, and if you're a candidate, how to get hired. And so we have a world leader speaking with us today, and they've brought in some special guests, and so I think you're really going to enjoy it. So my name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We do crazy things like this, but we do them for you, our members, to be able to be more effective, be more productive, to be more successful, and to grow around the world. And we're fortunate to have a great member, reesmarx, who is a global organization that can help you grow anywhere in the world through talent. And so it's my real strong pleasure to introduce the first speaker, who will take us through 4 speakers today. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions along the way. You can send them to info@globalchamber.org, or you can put them in the chat area there for the Q&A. So whatever you choose to do as you have questions along the way, send them in, and we will have time at the end to answer those questions. We are going to go for an hour, no more, no less. And so let's kick off with Erica. She's the Global Partnership Director at reesmarx. And Erica, I love working with you. Thank you for pulling all this together today, and we look forward to learning more.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction, and thank you everybody for listening in. As Doug mentioned, we are going to be going through successful hiring during COVID. We've watched a lot of Globinars as well as webinars and anything that everybody is putting out, but we felt as though there was sort of a lack of that clarity of how hiring has really been affected, both on the candidate perspective, the client perspective, and the resourcing perspective. So I am about to share my screen. Cesar, am I going to be able to do that? Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Perfect.
The magic has happened.
All right, perfect. So reesmarx, Global Talent Expansion, and our Globinar is based on the successful hires through COVID-19. So to start off of who is reesmarx, I know Doug gave a little brief overview, but ultimately we focus on business consulting, compliance, coaching, and high-touch recruitment. We are helping companies that are navigating through the complexities of not only expanding into new markets and regions, but also now the new norm that COVID has brought on. For 20 plus years, we have been working towards helping companies expand into new regions and really not have that face-to-face interaction during hiring processes. So now we can not only divulge our years of experience with dealing with that, but also have the unique perspectives of the client and candidate to go through it. As Doug mentioned, I am the Global Partnership Director, so I have to throw in the fact that we do provide a holistic solution, and that is through our partners. So even though we help with just that high-touch recruitment, compliance, coaching, and consulting, we also have partnerships that align us to fill all of the gaps that any of our clients run into when they are in fact expanding. So we provide a holistic solution just to help anybody, as there are a lot of questions and a lot of struggles and obstacles that come through, not only with hiring globally, but also hiring during COVID. So how things have changed immediately for hiring. As many know, a lot has changed. But regarding the hiring world, we saw 3 responses. We had people closing roles immediately that they had open. They said, no, we need to wait this out. Let's just close it. We'll revisit maybe in year 2021. It was not too much of a necessity, and we're just going to put it on hold. Then we have the individuals that decided, let's put it on hold and let's wait to see if this is over in the next few weeks, if it gets solved. And then eventually we found that they ended up closing the roles because COVID has been a pandemic that has not only affected everybody. I think what we initially all thought was going to be a short run thing that could find a solution. It's obviously much bigger and larger than we can even grasp. So a lot of those roles that were put on hold eventually did close, but immediate reactions wise, they said, let's just hold off for a minute. And then we had clients that just continued with hiring. They said, we're already hiring for a remote employee. Most of our work can be done from a remote basis. So no matter where this pandemic goes to, we can still continue to hire and we should not be affected. So now just a little add-on. From adapting to the COVID, obviously we've seen different regions react in different ways. Over the past 2 years, we've seen the APAC region really grow drastically, and a lot of clients and companies are trying to expand to the APAC region. Well, ironically, the APAC region now is probably the quickest area that is adapting. It seems that that area might have been affected earlier on, and so now with the sort of a little bit of a jump start, they're now being able to adapt quickly, which also gives us a really good idea of how much can be normalized and worked out over the coming weeks, just because we are seeing now that growth is in fact picking up again. The new norm. So the new normal is really big for hiring right now. Not having in-person interviews prior to COVID was unheard of. People were very scared by it. They felt as if they could not really bond with somebody, get to know them, understand the level that they could fit into a role. And now that's changed. Now, during the hiring process, there are no in-person interviews, and people are adapting very quickly. They're understanding that video, whether that be Zoom, Skype, Teams, any sort of tool that you use, there can be that level of interaction that we're looking for. And because companies and clients are now realizing that, that's becoming the new norm. They're realizing that I actually don't need an in-person. I don't need to fly out to, wherever they're expanding to, whether it be domestic or international. I don't need to go there. I can actually have this interview over video, and it's still beneficial, and it still shows that this person is worth hiring and qualified for the role that I have open. Also the fact that roles were made remote during this time. So home expenses, computers, internet, everything has now been adjusted for the employees that needed to work remotely and have that change. With that being said, because clients and companies went through those steps, it's roles that are likely going to stay remote for a long period of time. Now, when they're looking at leases and rentals, when somebody's already has a full ability to work at home, it's really a non-necessity. So we're finding that these remote roles might continue to stay remote even after this COVID pandemic. Which follows into my next bullet of the office is more for inspiration now. Now, when it comes to quarterly meetings or yearly meetings, it's going to be that much more influential of everybody being in person, because work and everything can be done prior to that. So these inspirational moments and these big moments to actually meet in the office space are actually going to be more influential for a company, more bonding for a company, and really bring everybody together more than maybe they originally had when somebody was meeting face-to-face on a daily level. Now, as I highlighted in the beginning, reesmarx has been doing this for 20 years. We specialize on global expansion or domestic expansion, but regardless, we help with companies that are hiring in different regions. So we're very used to the processes, the procedures, and everything that goes into hiring in regions that maybe isn't in your backyard. So with that, we have some processes and ways that we can share with you, and Nick's actually going to dive a little bit deeper into that, to telling you of how we go about it, and how it's actually beneficial to know now just because of COVID and how it's changing for everybody. So Nick is the Director of International, and Nick, feel free to introduce yourself and take over.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Erica. Thank you for that. Excellent. So, yeah, hi guys. So, yeah, as Erica said, Nick Gilmore here, based in London. I'm the director of our international recruiting across APAC and EMEA, and work with our recruiting team in the USA as well. I've been with reesmarx for 15 years or so. So from early stages through through growth and previous financial crisis and how we managed through that, and again over the last 10 years, etc. So I think really just to reiterate here a little bit about what Erica said, I think what's key is that as a company, reesmarx, we have experienced and managed remote interview processes, video interview processes for many years. Obviously, video has become more and more prevalent, and certainly over the last 5+ years, there's been a big change. So, this is not unusual for us. I think so. A few hints and tips I think here for both the employer, prospective employer, and the prospective employee. I think what's really key is to really embrace that video interview, embrace it as a part of the process, or embrace it as the process. We actually see this as a real opportunity for both client and candidate to really get a good feeling, maybe at a much earlier stage than would be normal in the traditional interview process, to get a really good feeling that there's a potential fit. Obviously, some people are more used to it, more comfortable than others. I think everyone probably listening in here has become a lot more comfortable with video communication over the last 8, 9, 10 weeks or so. So it's really becoming the norm, and it's something that we're used to, and we see our clients managing on a regular basis, and we're helping potentially new clients as well manage processes via interview. I think what is really key on video interviews is for both candidate and employer to be ready and have done their research. So again, it may sound obvious, but again, from the employer point of view, make sure you're all, you're up to date and aware of the CV of the person you're interviewing. You've got to make that candidate feel engaged over interview. From a candidate perspective, it's really key that you've got a lot of questions, ready. Those little sort of awkward silences can maybe have more of an impact on video. And again, may sound obvious, but have the questions ready. Many of your questions, hopefully the main questions, are sort of interviewed, are covered as part of the interview anyway. But again, it's important to have some additional questions to engage, at the end of that sort of formal interview with your client, with your prospective employer. Maybe it's something, commonality that you've got with the interviewer. So do your research on the interviewer. Be fully prepared with examples. You need to be ready to talk through examples of successes, sales successes, project successes, as part of the norm. You need to know your CV. Don't get thrown by any sort of questions about your CV, which is there for you and your interviewer to see. At the final step of interview processes, we will often see a face-to-face, which is which is covering a presentation. Now, again, we see more and more of that, and have done before COVID, more and more of that being done remotely. And obviously during COVID, that has been very much the case. Now, again, we see this as an opportunity for the prospective employer to get a real feeling for the candidate's flexibility and ability to communicate remotely. Many of many future customer visits, customer presentations are going to be done via video. Even post-COVID, more and more will be done via video. So it's key that you're able to judge your employees' ability to communicate via video. So again, it's actually a positive. It's an opportunity to really see that is something that your prospective employee has the ability to do. Body language is still important over video. It's harder to read, but from a client perspective, again, be prepared to, check and watch your interviewee. They need to be, looking engaged and focused on the interview. From a candidate perspective, again, face to face, you always have that. You should be able to see that sort of indication that maybe you've answered the question. But as a candidate, you must be paying attention to your interviewer on the video. Make sure that you're reading those little signs where maybe it's time for you to sort of draw an end to your answer. Make sure you've listened to the question. Again, I think these points are really even more key than in a face-to-face. Appearance, attire, background. Now, all of these should be, one would think would be obvious, but we've done this for years, and never ceases to amaze me when suddenly you have a candidate that's turned up just been doing some DIY or home improvement, as you guys in the US will call it, and they're looking like they're just they're not prepared. Treat a video interview as a face-to-face interview. Be on time. Make sure that you are the focus. Make sure you don't have a lot of distraction around you. Make sure your connection is good. All of these small things can make a huge difference. These small things make a real impact on that initial view from your interviewer. The key thing here is remote interviews are successful. So we have for 10 plus years managed interview processes that are 100% remote. And we see very little difference in terms of the success long-term of hires that have been done 100% remotely to ones that have managed through face-to-face interviews. We have done, the majority of our interview processes pre-COVID were probably 70–80% remote, just through the nature of the clients that we work with maybe a final face-to-face. Now, again, we very rarely see that final face-to-face making an impact. So the point here is that those processes being 100% remote make little, if no difference in terms of success. And Tim will talk through how his interview process went and the key points in making sure that they're successful. So over the last 8 or 9 weeks, we have worked on several roles that have opened from scratch with existing clients who are used to doing remote interviews, with existing clients who've maybe adapted their processes to manage the remote interview process, or with new clients for whom this is completely new. And we can help guide our clients through that. So the new normal, the new normal is really the reesmarx normal. This is not new to us. What is really key to ensure success is that we can work in real partnership with our client. Michael will probably talk with Erica about that as well. But it's key that we're not recruiting off a bit of paper. We're recruiting a person. We're recruiting for someone that's going to fit the organization. So we will always ask for some decent time and conversation with the different stakeholders in the interview process at the start to make sure we have an understanding of the company, of the culture, of the person that you're looking for, as much as the hard skills. And this is really even more important when the video interview is going to be the main focus through the process. We are an add-on to the HR team. We are representing the company in the market. And again, this is something we've done for a long time. If we're speaking to an HQ in the US, looking for candidates in Singapore or South Korea, and there's maybe a stakeholder in Europe, we manage many processes where stakeholders are in 3 different continents. Clear communication is really key in these remote processes. So really making sure that candidates are engaged. If there's going to be a delay in the process, not a problem. Just as long as that's communicated and we can communicate to the candidate, make sure that they realize they're not just being forgotten about on the other side of the world. Finally, the devil is really in the details. So really being prepared to make an offer in compliance with local rules and regulations, making sure that you're ready to make an offer, and we can help you with that through our knowledge and through our partners' knowledge. What's really key is that even now and also post-COVID, the impression we have seen maybe a little bit is there's going to be good candidates sat waiting, but good candidates will still be sought after and they will be gone. So it's important being ready to move. Overall message here is that we have found that hiring is perfectly possible in COVID. Tim will talk through that. And actually although fully remote interviewing might be new to some, it's certainly not new to us, and it's not new to some of our past, existing, and I'm sure future clients. So thank you very much, Erica.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Nick. Now we're going to transition to the client perspective, and we're going to be speaking to Michal Wagner with Interstate. She has worked with us, and they have just learned a lot about how to be hiring during COVID, as well as doing these remote style interviews. So Michal, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, and then we can jump into the conversational Q&A.
So my name is Michal, and I am a recruiter for Interstates. Recruit for all of our engineers, our designers and drafters, and then I also help with our international side of our business. And our company provides an electrical construction and automation solutions.
Perfect. Alrighty. So now, obviously you have been hiring during COVID and you were hiring before. So how has the hiring process really changed due to this pandemic?
So for us, especially stateside, definitely we liked that in-person interview. You bring somebody in and get to visit with them. And what we've done is we've done everything online now. Even if they're in the same location as us, same in the same city, we've pretty much done everything as an online interview. And so we've done all that through Teams. And it's really made us think a little bit creatively and out of the box on how do we do this? How do we structure our managers, what to expect? And so it's setting up that time with the managers beforehand, saying, okay, we've got a candidate, here's the process, here's how we're going to do things. And then when we visit with the candidate, we try to help them feel a little bit relaxed. We don't want this to be something that's a fear factor for them or something to be overly nervous about. And so how do we help keep them a little relaxed as we get through this process with them?
Awesome. So now, piggybacking on that statement of having the candidate feel relaxed, I think that really goes into the next question of tools to help screen out personality matches of existing team members. Anytime we had gotten feedback on interviews that you guys conducted, it was always very casual conversations and a strong understanding of really what the company culture is like. So what are the tools that you guys use to find that personality match?
So what we do is, of course, when we first start our interviews, what I do as my role as the recruiter is I will explain to them and say, we're going to go around and have everybody introduce themselves, tell you what they do for the company, how many years they've been with the company, and then we'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So we try to set that up in that aspect to kind of it gives the supervisors a chance to kind of add in a little extra info or just kind of help that setting that mode for this is going to be a very interactive conversation. And then when we start looking at personality matches, we really try to figure out questions to our core values and who we are as a company. And then we try to explain what our flexible and agile workforce is like. And in that process of still being able to see all your nuances and your body language and everything else from both the perspective of what the interviewee sees of us and what we see of them, then we can still pick up on all of that. How are they answering the questions? How did they react to that question that we just asked them? And so then we can take that and figure out, oh yeah, this is great. This guy has the integrity to do what we're looking for. This is perfect, so that's really how we try to put things together for us.
All right. Now, with that also sort of leads into the next of questions that are new and important to the hiring process. So you mentioned that there are questions that are asked to whether it invokes a certain reaction to showing a skill level or a personality level that's matching. Are there any questions that you feel are really key that are incorporated to all of your conversations, or do they differ with each conversation?
Some of them do differ a little bit between candidates and the role that we are looking for. And some of the questions that are consistent are, where would you like to be in the next 5 to 10 years? Or how would you like your next supervisor to coach you? Sometimes when you ask them, how do you want to be coached and where do you want to go, you really get a sense of that candidate as far as what are their goals, how do they want to set their growth pattern, and how do they want to interact with their team or their coach or their supervisor. And that gives you some insight as well as who are they going to be within that team and how are they going to mesh with that team.
That's fantastic. I think that really touches on something major of understanding them beyond a resume, beyond a CV. So that's very interesting and nice to hear. Now, I know that we touched on this prior to of how the hiring process has changed, but not having in-persons, would you say, although different and something to acclimate to, do you feel that you can rely on these video interviews just as much as an in-person would bring you?
Oh yeah, definitely. We have filled a few positions during this whole pandemic that we're going through. And we have really found some great candidates through this process of going online as well. And especially in the process that we're going through with you at reesmarx, you're still finding the great candidates and you're still having the great conversations and you're still able to see each other. And so for us, this is a good potential for us in the future. Do we need to really fly somebody in to the corporate office now? Because we've proven that this can work and we can still find all these great candidates and find a super hire for us.
That's fantastic. All right, awesome. Now, a little bit of a different type of question. Obviously, COVID has affected hiring with a candidate and a client, but what about your team's mindset? With bringing on the new people, as well as now the interviewing style being changed and whoever's being brought into the interview from the interstate side, how has your team's mindset changed? Are they, just as excited about it or a little bit apprehensive?
Our group has really been great about embracing the change. We do have corporate weekly meetings with the whole company, and it has helped really bring that sense of we're doing this as a team, we're working through this together. So where even some of the older generation is so used to that face-to-face and how important that is, they've adapted really well to this new method. We have been doing all of our onboarding remote and through Teams, and that has been very successful. We actually, all of my interns for my engineering groups are all going to be doing remote, and so it's going to be really that testament of how solid our teams are and how we can make this work. And so that is really exciting for us because it's just it's continually to push us forward and being able to change and adapt and find a new way to do things.
That is absolutely exciting, and it's very nice to hear that people are adapting very well to it, as I think that's also an unheard sort of group of people is the team that's already existing that's now being brought in to, different styles that wasn't their norm. So that's great. Is there anything additional that you would like to touch on regarding successful hiring during this COVID time that you feel like would be important for you to share to this group of people listening?
We're right in the middle of all that's going on, and as a team, we've really recognized what we can do as far as the interview setting. And as we look to the future, we're starting to realize that this next year might be more virtual recruiting for us. And what does that mean for us as a team? And how do we start reaching out to people in this atmosphere? And it's nice to know that the way that Interstate's culture is put together is that we are going to be able to do this successfully and to still find the candidates that we want. And so it's just, yes, it's a horrible situation, but yet it's still exciting for us as Interstates as we continue to move ourselves forward and be the best that we can be.
Perfect. Well, that is fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael, for not only speaking towards the process that you've been through, but as well as, speaking towards Interstates and the processes. So thank you so much. We will now transition to the candidate perspective, which I think is extremely important as well. Tim Van Baars is going to be speaking, as opposed to this being the Q&A like the last one. We wanted to do something a little different. So Tim is actually just gonna go ahead and speak towards his whole process as well as his feelings on everything. And he's going to introduce himself. So Tim, take the lead.
Do you hear me? Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Tim Van Baars. I'm based actually in Cologne, married, 2 kids, 47 years old. I've been working since about 20 years for software and IT vendors selling in the central region in Europe. In the next couple of minutes, I would like to speak towards this perspective of a candidate. how the recruiting process situation changed under COVID. As I recently went through an interview process with a New York-based company and was aligned by reesmarx in this recruiting process. Usually in the past, the interviewing processes were always a combination of remote and face-to-face, either flying in someone from the US or from the UK, or flying into London or into the Silicon Valley or the East Coast in the US. I've done a lot of travel for recruiting interviews in the past, over the 20 years. And I also have done myself candidate interviews while I was a hiring manager. So I have a little bit both perspectives. The missing part now, and you mentioned it as the new normal, is the face-to-face. I think it's good to have face-to-face, but it also works without. But you have to shape conditions that makes both sides, the hiring company and the candidates, into the position to get a good idea who you work with in the future. So I went through a process which was around 6 to 7 touch points. Mainly, I did a few calls, and at the end of the calls, we always said, "Oh wow, it's 1 hour gone," and we discussed so many things, and we asked each other lots of questions: how to tackle conflicts, how to set up a region in Germany. This is very important for the US companies, especially because Germany is quite different. In Germany, by the way, the interview process is mostly face-to-face. So it was a combination of discussions, asking questions, doing video calls in addition to the normal phone calls. And I got a task by the hiring company that I do a line out or set the stage for the region I'm working for in the future, to set up a 30, 60, 90 plan, how I tackle the region, what's from my point of view is important. And this was really, I can highly recommend this. And it was, I enjoyed this very much because I had the opportunity to look into the company, into their product lines, everything you do usually, but I could put it into a plan, and I presented it to my hiring manager. And later, when I had the highest interview with the chief revenue officer, I used parts of this presentation to make him confident on my capabilities and my person. And yeah, it's from my point of view, it should go both ways. Candidates should ask a lot of questions, increase the touch points, because if every touch point in a row of 7 or maybe 6, 5 touch points gives a good feeling, I think remote interviewing is valuable. And in my case, it turned out that I'm hired and I'm starting on Monday. Into a VP position for Central Europe.
Just a quick question,
Yes.
Tim, just very quickly. So just in terms of your interview process and yeah, how that, the frequency of the interviews from start to finish, how did you find that? And was it key that there was a consistent sort of feedback, etc.?
Yes, I have some feedback on that. Usually recruiting processes taking months, like 2 to 4 months. In that case, it was very much compressed to 7 weeks, having every week almost 1 interview, time for preparation, and then delivering. And yeah.
Perfect.
I think compressed is better, and you are really in it then.
Yeah, I think I noticed one of the questions that popped up was with regards to you know, the interview process, and is it quicker remote? And I think yeah, it can be quicker remote, obviously, and as long as the communication is clear, I think that works well, as it did with your case, Tim, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for speaking towards your experience, as well as how you, I can hear your excitement of joining your new role, and we are excited for you as well. So thank you again for your time. Now,
Thank you for the good alignment during the process.
Excellent.
absolutely.
Thanks to Sarah, who will be listening in, I think, hopefully. Yeah.
Now it is time for Q&A. I see that a few questions had popped up, so we're going to leave it to Doug and or Cesar to sort of share them and address them to whoever they feel is best.
Fantastic. Great content, lots of questions. Keep them coming in. If we don't get to them, we'll try to handle them offline. We have about 24 minutes left, and so we'll handle them one way or another. So really interesting information about this shift. What kinds of guidance, and maybe this goes primarily to Erica and Nick in terms of hiring managers and people who are now shifting the process to online, what advice and tips are you giving them relative to creating rapport, to understanding the candidates better? Tim talked about a test basically that he did, right? So are there tests, are there tricks, are there questions that you're advising hiring managers to use to be able to learn more, create rapport, and to be able to not just accelerate the process, but have the same kind of high quality process in hiring that a face-to-face can do?
So, sorry, Nick, you can probably add in right after, but I feel the switch has happened where before we would prep solely the candidate of what to expect out of the interview, who the interviewers were, and everything like that. So I can't say that there's one preparation that would go to every client out there, because every client is going to have their interviewing styles in their own way, just as a candidate would. The biggest piece of advice that I always like to put forth, and like I said, Nick might have something different, is to be as transparent as possible, is to put it out there of not only what the role entails, but also share their personal feelings towards the team environment. I think somebody gets really excited when they get the opportunity to speak of what they love about their company. And so selling your company and selling your love for your company is the biggest impact that you can do with not only bonding, but also gaining that trust with candidates, because candidates are human beings just like hiring managers, and they're interviewing you just as much you're interviewing them, and they want to hear about the positives. They need to hear obviously about the role details, but the positives and the passion, that's going to come through heavier when it comes to offer stage. And Nick, is there anything you would add?
I think it's a very, very fair question. I think this is the biggest challenge. Obviously, traditionally, you have that, that face-to-face meeting, get a real sort of connection, etc. But I think what's key here is that, I do believe you can get those that rapport. You can get that feeling for the body language. You can get that feeling for the engagement of the candidate, and via video. I think as well, it's important that the candidate also feels that rapport with their hiring manager. And I think what Tim described, for example, was adding in a couple of touch points as well. So there's more consensus. Now again, I think there's a balance between having 20 people interview and having 5 or 6, but maybe there are a couple of additional touch points, for both sides to feel comfortable. If there's a consensus, then that works, and the candidate needs that rapport. They need to know that they're going to be able to communicate and have that communication with their hiring manager that's going to work over the next 5+ years, all being well. And I think Michael and Tim have both, from the other side, sort of described how, but it is certainly the biggest challenge, in terms of, traditionally people like that face-to-face contact. And I think, as described earlier, we've seen that, there's very little, if any, difference in the actual long-term success of hires that have been made remotely or or face to face.
Got it. If you haven't seen it, Jamie Cassip of Google has given some hints on and tips on how to do a video just in general. So we'll include that in the blog post as a follow-up. It's on YouTube, Jamie Cassip, C-A-S-A-P. Check that out. He's got a series of videos around hiring and technology through his role in Google. I highly recommend it. I also, in leading up to the next question, encourage you in the hiring world to watch the Netflix program on Jeffrey Epstein that has just started to run. It's interesting, in the second episode, I was watching it last night, there were two hiring managers who talked about interviewing him in person and how he had lied on his resume. There were a whole series of things that were totally off base, and yet he was able face to face to talk to them and manipulate them into continuing to hire them. And both of them talked about how it was the biggest regret of their entire career that they allowed him to continue in his career because of the face-to-face manipulation that he had done. So it can go wrong in person. When you're doing it by video, what tips do you have for the interview person to build rapport? It may be more difficult to do that type of manipulation online. What kinds of backgrounds should they be having? What kinds of things, research maybe, that they should be doing ahead of time? What are some of the tips you'd have for interviewers so that they're fully prepared for the hiring manager?
So for the interviewee, sorry, yeah.
For tips for the interviewee, what kinds of background should they use? What research should they be having? What are some of the things that they should be asking about? What are your tips on them so that they're making their best impression to the hiring manager?
So Erica, I'll let you go there. And
I like that Nick passed that to me. So I came from the recruitment side. So preparation and interview prep were something that I went overly detailed on. Doug and anybody listening who has received an email from me can understand the level of details that I shouldn't go into, but I do. So interview preparation, the real thing that you need to take away from it is know who you're interviewing with. If the recruiter does not give you that insight, find out. Always try to walk away with an email from an interview. So that way thank you notes are always there. And having that in your mind before an interview is important. Always have a notepad and a pen out. It's never rude to look down and start writing down things. Be prepared with questions that you feel like are important, because it's not cheating if you come up with the questions before you start speaking, because your questions, they might come up after the fact and you might not have had the opportunity to ask. So it's always good to prepare yourself of finding out a little bit more about the company and having those questions justified and answered during a conversation. I always say it's good to just take a deep breath and be yourself, because when it comes down to it, you want this company for the long run. You're not looking for the next 2 years. You're not looking for the next 6 months. So as long as you stay yourself, you stay authentic, you're not in an area with a ton of distractions, and you give your full personality and your full talent, your full skill explanation, you're going to be successful. So it's just preparing yourself for what seems basic, but is very important. It's going to impact the client that much more, because you're going to seem that much more prepared.
Yeah, and Tim, did you prepare any differently for video interviews than you did for face-to-face interviews?
Yes, for the video interviews, I'm usually setting a structure for myself. When I have discussions over the phone, I mainly let the interviewee talk, asking questions, and I revert sometimes with questions to get a little bit into the dialogue. And but it's freehand usually, the normal telephone calls. But for the video interview, sometimes you have a task, sometimes not. But there's things you have to cover, especially what's important for the job. And a good agenda is always the job description. You can go through it, which is maybe a good recommendation. I did it like that. I've looked over the job specs and covering questions for all of them. I wrote them down and checkboxed them.
Okay, so in my opinion, it's again just be as prepared as you would be for a face-to-face, and even over-prepared. As I said earlier, just always making sure you got the questions there. It's just important to not feel. It's key that you have all the questions answered that you need answered. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're not sure if it's a question that you feel comfortable asking in a video interview, speak to the person that you're working with on the recruitment side. As the intermediary. To maybe get that question answered, or see if they think it's okay for you to discuss with the client.
Okay, very good. We have some more questions along that line. One very specifically about backgrounds. I think those of us watching the news, a lot of the politicians and doctors who are talking about COVID, they have bookcases behind them. My wife loves to comment about the different kinds of bookcases and rates them on a scale of 1 to 10. I noticed Tim has a very professional bookcase type background that kind of aligns with at least my perception of what he does at work, which is kind of cool. What's your suggestion around the background that we should have? And would false backgrounds, probably a false background of a beach when you're interviewing on an interview would not be a really smart idea, but what are some of the things that you would normally recommend, maybe on both sides, from the interviewee and the interviewer side?
Yeah, I mean, I recommend certainly, something that is relatively, neutral, that there's not too many distractions in that background. As you say, if there's a bookshelf, fine, but, as you say, there may be someone there trying to see what books are in there, get an idea of the type of person you are from what books are in that bookshelf. So you have to, I remember hosting a day of interviews in Frankfurt several years ago, when I was early in my career, and so the CEO was coming to interview, and I was managing the candidates at the hotel, and I had a book by Michael Moore, I think it was, sort of conspiracy theory, and I remember the CEO just saying to me, a bit of advice for your future career: don't have a book like that visible. That may be not something that that I, as a person, am in agreement with. So just good to keep that separate. So I think something neutral where there's not a distraction, really. I think that's the key. You should be the point of focus. I think everyone's backgrounds here, I think, work really well. I think neutral from my point of view. Again, from an interviewer's point of view, I don't know if Michael has found a preference in terms of what's in the background, and
we really haven't seen a preference. It's most of what we are looking for and looking at is more the candidate and their responses. We have learned with going virtual, you see a lot of individuals' home offices, and they all vary from a raise. Some people have had to work in their kitchens. And so we try not to focus too much on what their background is, because we're really focused on that candidate. And so for us, I agree, if you can do something neutral, that's great. Be away from kids, dogs, anything else that's popping up during that interview. We've just learned to adapt. We've had to, so we kind of try to overlook that part of it and really get that focus on that candidate.
That makes sense. So again, related to this topic around culture, one of the reasons why we visit each other, right, is to understand as an interviewee, does this company have a culture that is a fit for me, and vice versa. The company is trying to figure out, does this person fit into the way we are? So how do you do that if you're doing a video? How do you create the opportunity to ask those questions? Many times those things are done at lunch, right? All kind of offline. So how are you advising companies to really find the fit for folks? And then if you're an interviewee, how do you find out about the culture so that you know whether you're going to be a fit or not?
I think I actually immediately, as you asked that question, I thought about a client that we're working with that invited a candidate interviewing to a team happy hour. And I don't think it involved actually anything with drinking, but it was the end of the week on a Friday, and everybody on the entire team was there to just talk. And there were no restrictions on to talk about work. There was no requirements to talk about, you know, what was going on. It was just a nice time for the team to come together as a whole and just interact as they naturally do. And I think that is probably, in my eyes, I had never heard, obviously COVID has brought that out of the company, or maybe they were doing it before, but I had never heard of that type of interaction and bringing a candidate into that process. And I thought that was extremely eye-opening, because that shows culture right there. That shows somebody on a Friday relaxing, no you're about to have your weekend, you are being your authentic self. You might even be your tired self. And I think if you show yourself tired, you're probably showing maybe the best or worst of yourself. So that was a really creative way to bring somebody in. Nick, have you heard of any ways or think of any ways that would be?
Yeah, I think there's a natural way in it. I just think, you know, again, as Tim mentioned earlier in his piece, you know, he was speaking, you know, with his interviewers, and they'd suddenly realize an hour had gone, and, you know, the conversation had flowed naturally. Again, you know, the conversation should flow naturally on the video as much as in person. You know, if there's, you know, I think there shouldn't be too much difference there. I think as well, you know, you can always use people's past experience and previous experience to judge that as well. You know, are they fitting into a similar type of size organization? Have they done something that is similar to what is being done, you know, that we're looking to do here? You know, all of those points I think sort of work well. Have they worked in a remote you know, set up before? So again, those are sort of more general cultural points, but again, I think those connections face to face can be made over video as well, and that just general flow and just communication style, you can get that on video. And I think sometimes, you know, it's even more difficult to get it on video than face to face. It's difficult. You mentioned, Doug, earlier, you know, people talking their way, you know, out of awkward situations face to face. You know, I think that's harder on video. So I think you get a real, much more of a, probably even an even more in-depth insight that there's a good connection and cultural match on video as there is face to face.
Got it. A similar question in the area was asking about, how do you advise managers who are not comfortable doing video, you know, to switch from face to face to this, and I think vice versa, right? If you're a candidate and you're not comfortable. This question reminds me of earlier in my career. I remember when all the managers were advised that they now needed to do their own letters. They had to type their own things. So this is way back, right? And that was a traumatic experience for management. Aren't we in a new day right now where if you're still stuck on doing things the old way, you want to get back to all of that? Don't you advise them, I guess, grow up or change, or, you know, we're in a new world. So, I mean, is there any other solution to that? Because we really are in a new normal, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a very valid question, and you know, certainly something that we're experiencing on a daily basis with clients that have you know, put things on hold because they need to have a face-to-face interview, or clients that are maybe, you know, reticent about starting processes because they want to have a face-to-face interview. So, you know, again, our advice there, and you know, our sort of, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, in that, you know, it works, it has worked. We've got experience of that working not just over the last 8-9 weeks, but we've got experience of that working over the last 9-10 years. Even from, you know, from when I first started in this role 15 years ago, I would be, you know, a lot of our clients would want me to go, and I would go and spend a couple of days in Frankfurt, or a couple of days in Rome, a couple of days in Madrid, to interview a list of, you know, a short list of candidates, 8-9 people, and then come back with a short list. I miss those days. But these days, you know, people don't want us to do that because we can do calls and videos, etc., and have the same level of success? So it's a very fair question, and it is something that I understand is a hurdle to get over, and I understand some people find that tough to get over. From a client perspective, though, we can show it works. From a candidate perspective as well, it's perfectly natural to want to meet in person, face to face, and it's maybe something that isn't normal, but again, it can work. And I think what we tend to see is it varies from region to region. What we've tended to see in, for example, South Korea, China, that people are much more open to that method of doing it because they're maybe used to having a remote hire, whereas, as Tim mentioned earlier, Germany typically is much more that face-to-face culture. So it is something that varies region to region, and it's something that, again, our advice to both client and candidate is that it is perfectly possible. The proof is there. It works, and it's worked with other clients of ours, and it will work for yourself. And for candidates, again, I think what's important from our side is just as well, if we know from the start that that's going to be the process, just making sure the candidate's on board with that from the start. So I'm just aware of time here as well.
Very good. Erica, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick covered it. The biggest thing is it is a new normal. So it's expected that people are not going to be comfortable with it for the first time. And, that is a really key piece to why reesmarx is here, is to make things simpler on both the client and the candidate, talk things out, understand where their comfortability levels are, and explain that out to whoever needs to know. So, I mean, it's not as much as, it might be my normal, or it might be, the people coming into the workplace normal to do everything via video. I completely understand. I still use a notepad and a pen. So, I mean, typing my notes, I'm still, there's things that people find preferences on, and we're here to simplify that for them, make it more normal for them.
There's a comment in the field from one of your team members who suggested that if you are wrestling with that, to perhaps video yourself, do some tests and then record it and play it back to yourself. It might feel uncomfortable and it might feel silly, but it'll start to hopefully help you understand how to present yourself in the best light and to overcome any issues. We had a speaker recently. I noticed that they inserted the word into every other word. It was like, hello, it was like, wow, very uncomfortable listening to that through a period of time. And if you do that, you shouldn't do that. I do that as well, and I've listened to myself, so it's like, I got to stop that, but fortunately not that often. So definitely record and listen to yourself and get people's feedback, on your own situation. We only have 2 minutes left. So what I would ask you to do, we're not going to get to all the questions, some really good questions, and so we're going to try to answer those in the blog post that follows this. Thanks everybody for Zooming in, for being on Facebook Live. What I would ask you to do in the last minute or two left, maybe each of you for 30 seconds wrap up, and is there anything that you want to emphasize, or maybe something that we haven't talked about that's important? And perhaps we start, Michael, is there anything that you want to re-emphasize or point out before we finish up today?
I think the biggest thing as we go through some of this is that there's always a better way to do something. And just because we did something 6 months ago doesn't mean it's always the best fit for today's world. And so that's the biggest thing, is always evolving, always finding something new and a better way to do something. Great
advice. Tim, how about you? What final advice do you have in 30 seconds?
Yeah, listening to the recent discussion, I feel embrace the change and get comfortable to it, doing maybe some training on that, and video interviewing is a fundamental part of the new world, I think.
So we can see why you got hired, Tim. Really good presentation. Nice job. Nick, anything in conclusion?
Yeah, I think that is key. I think what Tim said there and Michael's said there, exactly, the world changes, constantly, the role of recruitment consistently changes, and the way things are done. And I understand that there is obviously reticence or questions, and something new is always different. But again, the main point is, we've done this before. Many of our clients have done this before, so it's not something that should hold people back, by months or so, or in terms of bringing on people that are needed in the business.
And waiting for the old normal to reappear is not a productive activity. That's one of the things I got from you, Nick. Erica, how about you? You want to do the final conclusion?
I think they summed it up absolutely perfectly. If anybody has, questions in the future, obviously feel free to reach out to us. We're also here to share more information. If you have more specific questions, or if you just need help from an advice standpoint, we're here.
Really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to wrap up right now. I will say, Global Chamber is really proud to have members like reesmarx who are so competent and capable and able to work across borders in as effective ways that you do. We have programs coming up on disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence and digital transformation, women's leadership. We have legal and ethical challenges that are going to be discussed in future Globinars in the next few weeks. So stay in touch with Global Chamber, globalchamber.org. We really appreciate not just the speakers, but everybody who Zoomed in or Facebooked in today from all around the world. And we have a great group of you. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.